Liberals over here do not believe in the freedom of choice that Canadians should have.
Remember all of those attack ads? Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, they want to take away your right to choose. Yeah, turns out that, as per usual, the people who are saying things like that usually have something to hide. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below. And of course, share this video to anybody who needs a little extra wake-up call today. Also, the Conservatives may have made a very big mistake, and we're going to talk about all of that as well. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated.
And I do not think it would be opportune for any of us, including my Liberal colleagues, to pack up this committee's work for 3 months without having done a single thing to help the crime-riddled communities of our country. And I speak on behalf of my own constituents in Elgin, St. Thomas, London South, but all Canadians. So I think adjournment is entirely inappropriate when we have Canadians that have elected us to get serious about this. And I actually don't think any of these members want to face their own constituents over the next 2.5 months and say that I chose to not even listen, not even debate a motion about some of these issues because I thought it was easier to start my summer vacation early.
I feel like there's nothing that is a greater reality check than the fact that the Greens, the Bloc, the NDP, and the Conservatives have all said they will work throughout the summer in order to get some things done, because by the time that Parliament comes back after summer recess, it's going to be about a full year since we've had an active Parliament working. A full year. Okay, but the Carney Liberals say, nah, we want to fast track some of these things. Here's some loose ideas. We're not going to answer any questions at all. And, good luck. Have a good summer. I know we will. Elbows up! Elbows up! And this is something very important to note, especially when it comes to all of the other details of today's episode. So this was initially posted by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and I will read to you what the government corrupt on X had to say about it, writing, Canada's national debt in 2019 was $700 billion when Mark Carney began advising Trudeau and the Liberal Party on economic issues. To clarify, the details that I have been able to find have suggested that Mark Carney was officially on paper, at least in the news, advising Trudeau in 2020. It probably was earlier. I just couldn't find any data for that personally. Today, Canada's national debt is $1.26 trillion, an 80% increase under Carney's guidance. Some claim he's an economic genius. He's not. He's an economic hitman.
Minister, my last question, I guess, in a very important way. Obviously, the Conservative opposition in the House supports this bill, as the opposition does in this chamber. Our concern, though, is that there's a number of members of this current government that were members of the previous government that were, in our view, a little bit overzealous when dealing with bills like C-69, C-48, and putting into place impediments and red tape when it comes to fast-tracking and approving projects in the energy sector. What has changed? And will this government be a lot more ready to make sure that our oil gets east-west and that LNG is finally delivered to the countries that have been begging for Canada to start delivering energy?
Okay, I'm going to give you a two-part answer there. Part one is, I am so proud to be the minister who got TMX built. I referred very intentionally in my 2024 budget speech to the Golden Weld, which finished the building of that pipeline. That pipeline is going to add $1.25 billion of money. It will return directly to the federal government this year, and it gives us diversification at a time when we certainly need it. You spoke about LNG. There are new LNG projects coming online this year on our West Coast, exactly when we need it. Those didn't happen overnight. They have been being built for some time, and again, they are coming on stream exactly when we need them.
The Trans Mountain Expansion Project was initially a private sector initiative by Kinder Morgan, and in 2018, due to regulatory uncertainty and activist legal delays, they threatened to pull out. So the Trudeau government bought the pipeline for, I think it was $4.5 billion at the time, of taxpayer money and assumed all construction risk. And the cost, by the way, under government ownership went from $5.4 billion to $34 billion. That increased by 300%. That's according to the parliamentary budget officer, at least. And that pipeline is now considered uninvestable by the private sector, and the government still owns it. The only reason why TMX needed money was because of the same Liberal government and their regulatory absolute chaos. Unless you are promoting a socialist or communist government, which it appears she is in this case, that is not something to be proud of, by the way. The fact that government interference destroys private investment, the fact that nothing will get done unless the government takes it over. And there's so many people who know nothing about this. They're so uneducated and they think, oh, that's great that they got it done. It's not great. It's not a win. It is a huge warning that under Trudeau and Carney-styled governance, the only way to get anything built in this country is if Ottawa owns it and controls it and then also spins it like it's a campaign ad. And that's not capitalism. That is crony socialism. That is exactly what that is. And that is a very, very scary precedent to set in your country, especially for something as profitable as a pipeline for those investors. In any other country that isn't under socialism, dictatorial, or communism styles of governments, pipelines are beyond profitable, and they enrich the entire country when done and made and invested into by the private sector. That's not a hard sell at all, actually. The fact that the Canadian government has made it so impossible to get anything done, which I do believe is by design, to the point where you have government owning pipelines, you have government who now wants to own the housing industry. They want to build modular homes. And you also have the government making mandates for things that aren't working so that they can essentially completely change behavior and also own every other sector and remove your freedom of choice because they know better. That is terrifying.
But thank you for recognizing and highlighting that Conservatives are supporting this legislation.
Now, here's where I think Conservatives made a mistake, and there's a lot of layers to this and a lot of things that you can theorize on, so I'm just going to give you my thoughts here. But the legislation she's referring to, which was displayed on screen there, was Bill C-5. And Bill C-5 is something we've been talking about on the show the last couple of days, which essentially it's essentially something to speed up projects of national interest. However, there's a lot of problems with this bill because the Conservatives voted to fast track the bill. It's supposed to be voted on this Friday. Every other party is against that. It's absolutely rushed. And Bill C-5 gives Cabinet the ability to override, I think it's 13 federal laws, including environmental, Indigenous consultation, and also fisheries protections for up to 5 years per project. And so it does set a very big precedent in terms of executives being able to bypass Parliament, judicial checks, as well as consultations with the public, right? With very little transparency. This in the hands of the Liberal government under Mark Carney, under all of their plans, of which we'll continue to talk about in the latter half of this episode, is very scary. And it's also the kind of power that Conservatives would typically rally against, right? However, they endorsed it.
Prime Minister Carney has stated that we need national consensus to build a pipeline. Can you tell us in concrete terms what that means exactly? What is that consensus and what will happen if a provincial premier says no? It's very difficult to define in specific terms. Everyone has their own theories, but we are clearly not going to be imposing a project on a province or territory. This may be a way to build this consensus in a more effective way.
There was a lot more to that, but he did not give an answer. And the reason why is because this is a scapegoat for the Liberals where they can say, well, You got to blame David Eby. It wasn't us. He was the one who turned it down. Fascinating, though, when you consider what the actual law is, which is that the federal government is responsible for federal projects. Premiers are responsible for provincial projects. So if there's something federally going from coast to coast, let's say, that would actually be the federal government's job to approve that and not get a consensus, which you will never get because people will never agree on everything. And they know that. They know that Quebec will say no. They know that BC will say no. They know that Alberta will continue to be landlocked unless they are actually able to convince one of those provinces otherwise or find a different route. Now, the thing about this bill that's, again, there's lots of layers to it in terms of why the Conservatives would vote in favor of fast tracking it. This could have definitely been strategic, and I'm going to hypothesize a lot here because I do think that this was probably a mistake at the end of the day. But again, there's a lot of layers to it. So number one, the Conservatives would have loved the economic optics of it because Bill C-5 promises to fast track construction, infrastructure, whatever, for resource projects, pipelines, ports, all of that stuff, cut federal red tape, and also knock down interprovincial trade barriers. And so it aligned very much with build things and grow the economy, which is what Conservatives are all about. They also could think that they're going to be in power soon. So they would maybe say if we form government after the next election, then we inherit those powers. So why would we fight them? However, that alone is very naive, albeit maybe a little dangerous, though, because given Mark Carney being like this woke technocrat and having all the powers that the Liberals do in terms of controlling the media and doing all these things in this bill, which allows them to do things without even having any real debate on it, where you can hide a lot of it. I do think that it gambles a little bit too much more than I'm comfortable with on potential future political gain, and also ignored the core Conservative principle, which is limited government, right? It's also completely possible that they didn't realize just how extreme this was when they initially voted to fast track it. And to be clear, they're not voting, they haven't yet, for this bill to go through. So there is also a possibility that they got played because the Liberals wrote a bill that sounds very pro-growth, knowing that it would bait the Conservatives, and then they buried a power grab deep inside of it. The Conservatives voted for it, maybe thinking that they were being clever. However, they have now helped expand executive power in a way like we've never seen in this country before, weakened Parliament, and also set a precedent for future Liberal overreach. Maybe even worse. To me, when you go through the fine print of this bill, Conservatives are traditionally the defenders of checks and balances, provincial rights, and also the democratic process. And then they voted to essentially speed up something that would bypass debate, empower cabinet more than they already are, give them even more control than they already have that nobody else has a say in, and centralized decision making, which is kind of against everything that the Conservatives are all about. Now, again, that bill has not actually been voted on. They agreed that it should be fast-tracked, right? That doesn't mean that they're going to agree now that they've had the time to go through all of it and see the controversy and realize maybe a couple things there that they are in fact going to vote in favor of it. They might, but as it stands right now, they have only voted to speed up the bill, which I don't know. What do you think about that? More importantly, let me know in the comments down below.
These Liberals over here do not believe in the freedom of choice that Canadians should have when it comes to the vehicle that they drive. Right now, they have a mandate in place that makes it so that Canadians will have to buy EVs. They will have to. But that does not fit the needs of Canadian families. And especially at this time when Canadian families are struggling to make ends meet, they cannot afford the additional $20,000 that this mandate will add to their bill when they go to purchase a new car. Right now, this government has an option, and that is to vote with Conservatives to relinquish their ban on gas-powered vehicles.
So yes, by all accounts, your freedom of choice is not actually a thing in Canada at all, in many ways, honestly. But in this one, the votes were 191 to 141, where the Liberals voted against the Conservative motion, which was brought forward to end the electric vehicle madness. Their current laws are that they will only be selling EVs by 2035 in Canada. Now, take a listen to this minister, and then we'll just have a joyous little time fact-checking her here, okay?
Mr. Speaker, what I will do is stand up for our auto workers all across our country. I will stand up for a strong auto industry. I will stand up to make sure that we're climate competitive and going where the world is moving, which if they actually looked at studies, globally, EV sales are up. If the members opposite actually care about making sure that we are standing up for our auto workers, I hope that they will stand up with us to make sure that we are protecting the industry.
First things first, it is not a global standard, despite what the Liberals claim. And to say that globally, if you actually just looked at the data, that data is coming out of China. Just going to throw that out there. It's not coming out of anywhere else, only China. In fact, Europe is walking back on EV timelines. Germany, the UK, France, they're rethinking bans. The United States has completely pulled away from the EV mandates, all of the EV the green new scam, as Trump likes to call it. And the reality here in Canada is that automakers, such as Ford as an example, have reported a significant drop in EV sales in early 2025. The reason for that, they attributed it, at least partly, to the end of the federal incentive. It was like $5,000 that you could get if you bought an EV. And Guilbeault actually said that they are planning to introduce another federal incentive. And there is a lot to unpack with that, of just really a harsh reality check. I also, just to throw this out there as well, in the United States, EV sales forecasts have dropped from 48% to 27%. China makes up for about 66% of the total global EV sales, and a lot of that is also due to state subsidies, very similar to Canada. I don't know why Canada is so obsessed with aligning ourselves with China of all places, but alrighty. Nonetheless, Canada and the US are not China.
Mr. Speaker, after 10 years of Liberal government, Canadians are facing a cost of living crisis, and now Liberals are proposing to ban all gas-powered vehicles, including pickup trucks and SUVs, in just 10 years, a policy that will cost 38,000 Canadian jobs and drive up the price of new vehicles by $20,000 each. Conservatives believe that Canadians who drive their kids to school or to sports or themselves to work should have the freedom to choose the vehicle that's right for them and their families at a price that they can afford. Why does this Liberal government apparently disagree?
With this mandate, there's also a couple of just, wow, I'm sorry, what? The fact that Canada's infrastructure isn't at all ready. Public charging is incredibly limited, especially outside of major cities and urban areas, obviously. The power grid is also not at all anywhere close to a full EV transition. And you also have bills like, the No New Pipelines bill, what everybody calls it, C-69, where, yeah, okay, great. So you want to have all of these charging stations. What's going to power them, though? What about the backups? Yeah, that doesn't quite add up. And also, without EV incentives, without the government getting involved and bribing you to buy something that they want you to buy because they know better than you, EV sales are declining. And let's just put this very clearly to you. EV mandates are not just out of touch. They are absolutely dangerous. You do not mandate what the market is already adopting because it's a better option. People see the value in it. They want it. You only mandate things that people don't want. So you're forcing Canadians to buy unaffordable vehicles upwards of $20,000 more than what an average vehicle would cost. Cars that they can't charge, by the way, because of our infrastructure not meeting the capacity, and then using global statistics that don't even apply to North America or South America. That's insane. And I'm just really curious what they plan to do. Apparently they care so much about the auto industry. That's weird because the auto industry is going to collapse. They've told you that if you force these mandates on people. So here we are again with some more liberal government top-down social engineering disguised under climate policy. Does this really have anything to do with the climate? Or does this have something to do with investing more in China, where solar panels are made, where windmills are made, where the vast majority of EV car batteries are made? You're helping out China by doing that, and also limiting the competition coming out of Canada by expanding our oil, which everyone in the world wants, by the way. And you don't want to do that. And why wouldn't you? Could it be because of your own investments overseas with other pipelines? Of course, you would want to stifle the growth and success of Canada so that you individually could profit more if that is where your money lies. Wouldn't you? You may ask yourself, how on earth did the Liberal government get in power yet again? And here's Francois-Philippe Champagne gaslighting you to pieces. I guess we can't call it gaslighting anymore. Maybe it'll be called electrolyting. That was bad, whatever. About exactly how the Liberals twist things and manipulate things and omit the truth, omit the details in order to successfully brainwash the vast majority of the public.
Well, Madam Senator, I would say when it comes to affordability, your colleagues in the House have voted against every affordability measures we presented for the last decade. And I think Canadians have noticed that in the last election. Because you voted systematically against all the affordability measures we presented, whether it was about childcare, whether it's about the National School Food Program, whether it was with respect to the disability legislation that we presented.
What a brilliant way to completely omit all of the reasons why Conservatives voted against that, many of which I actually discussed in my interview with Pierre Poilievre that I had the privilege of doing prior to the election. You're welcome to watch that video. It's on the channel from a couple months back, but yikes. That one just sent me to another level, I think. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below. And of course, share this video as well. And I will talk to you tomorrow.